Hello and welcome to the Wolf Den podcast. I'm your host Nako, joined by my co-host Zenitsu, and today we'll be discussing further into the development of the BT8 metagame. We have a little bit more results from in-person and otherwise events for BT8, and we're really just going to be able to go back over these top decks and what we're really seeing the meta turn into and where it's going.
Yeah, so over the weekend, the big one that we had was Top Cut. It was like 500 players, which is a pretty decent sized. It was 7 rounds because of all of the ties that Yellow had at top tables, because Yellow manages to sneak up its way to top tables and then managed to tie. And that actually cuts rounds short. It was supposed to be 9 rounds based on that many players, but I digress. And as far as the overall representation, there was one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight different decks spread throughout top 16, which is pretty healthy actually. Granted, the majority of them were Yellow Hybrid and Imperial, but that's kind of to be expected. A lot of people saw the early results of Yellow Hybrid success and they were just like, I want to play that because it won. And then Imperial is just a really easy deck to pick up and play just because most of the cards come from the starter deck. Um, like the only things you really have to invest in is probably Davis, and that's it. Like you could sub out the jamming Vmon if you really wanted to, but that's the second other card. But it just makes Imperial a very accessible and very easy to play deck because it's also a more aggro based deck. But as far as what actually won the top cut, it was actually Human on Mastimon. Then second place was Lychee on Black War Greymon. And then third, fourth, and fifth place were all yellow hybrids. Sixth place was blue hybrids. Seventh place was Imperial, and eighth place was yellow hybrids. If we're going to be extending to top 16, then it goes Imperial, Lord Nightmon, Ancient Greymon, Armor
I
Rush,
think that's red hybrid.
another
It doesn't
uh
say it, but I think that's red hybrid. Yeah, it's red hybrid.
Yeah, Ancient Greymon Red Hybrid. It still manages to do work. Then we have at 12th Armor Rush, then Blue Hybrid, and then the rest of it is just more Imperial. So a pretty decent spread of different decks that are all topping on top of whatever else everyone else was playing, because there was still just a lot of other decks that obviously didn't make it to top 16, but were still shown and represented in the tournament.
Um, so we now have a fairly substantial data set, including, you know, the EU regional, but now for North America more specifically. Um, this is including all the marbles. This is all the starter decks, all of BT8, everything completely legal. This is the meta moving forward. And as you mentioned, 5 out of the top 16, the largest deck represented in the top 16 was Imperial Dramon, though I think relevant, at least to me, just weird coincidences. Only one of those was the top 8. The rest of them are all between 8 and 16. Um, and as far as the 4 yellow hybrids represented, all of them were in the top 8. 3 of them, or 2 of them being in the top 4.
I mean, they all like managed to tie against each other, which helped with the standings, but I digress.
Honestly, yeah. Like as someone who plays yellow hybrid, if if that's how these tournaments are going to play out and it rewards the deck for doing so, like maybe that would begin the discussion for implementing some sort of change or forced top cuts and stuff like that, because if the tournament's just going to end early because the yellow hybrid players can just basically go undefeated, hit those top tables and then tie and coast and guarantee some higher placing and prizing as a result. Obviously, like the difference between like second and 16th doesn't matter so much in the scheme of like they all qualify to nationals equally, but um,
For other events like Ultimate Cups that actually could
yeah,
start to match.
for Ultimate Cups that'd be a pretty fairly huge deal. Um, so I have a couple things I'd like to think about this. So I guess this is the port of the meta where we look more into the why more so than the what. Um, because this isn't surprising to me. Like, there's a couple things that are obviously the Lord Nightmon. I couldn't have called if you had even like told me the day before. Like, this player had, like, let's just say this player literally won worlds. Like, they won worlds and they're playing Lord Nightmon. Do you think they'll top? No. Like, but they're there. Lord Nightmon's there, and um, we'll put the link in the description to like the Google Doc spreadsheet and everything. But it's literally just BT7 Lord Nightmon. Like, this deck could have 100% been played in BT7. Includes no BT8 cards, no starter deck cards, no none of the Master Ace cards. This is just like the most recent card in this thing is Dynasmon. That's BT6. Is this anything BT7?
It
Pulsemon.
has the
Pulsemon. Yep.
Pulsemon and Electric Rush.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Electric Rush. Because I know I did try out the bulk bout Electric Rush Lord Nightmon for I think exactly one local event, and then immediately took it apart because it was bad. I didn't like it. But um, that version, that's the yellow that's Lord Nightmon that we saw in BT5. Obviously, with a new coat of paint, some better cards mixed in there as they acquired them. But that's a strong deck. But it's also not doing anything different than Lord Nightmon did what 3 sets ago.
No, it's still playing, at least this list, it's still playing you like your classic control package where you're trying to use War Growlmon to line up a slash Angemon play. You have your Angemon from BT03 to get multiple bodies out with Lord Nightmon. The only like big difference is they are running Gladymon to help dig out Dynasmon because he's another Holy Warrior. Although, like, the interesting thing is, like, I think Lord Nightmon with BT8, like if you're actually going to update it more for BT8, has a lot of different tech and tools. You have both Rapidmon and Magnamon are both level 4 Holy Warriors. You have Chimeramon and DNA Digivolution, where if you're just playing this tempo based game, Lord Nightmon playing Gladymon to then play another level 4 or Digivolve from a level 3 into a level 4 for cheap to then DNA. Like there's a lot of possible playlines that Lord Nightmon and its little package can open up, and BT8 supports and facilitates that on top of various other two color synergies and combinations that you could come up with.
I think like the real reason why I mentioned it more specifically because it is only one of 16, and it like while it's notable that it's there, like there's more pressing issues. Um, I think it really is a data point as far as to the crowd that is like concerned with power creep, concerned with um how quickly decks rotate in the meta, and concerned with like taking breaks and coming back and trying to play like a patched up version of your old deck because Lord Nightmon clearly isn't going anywhere. It isn't getting necessarily that much better, but like besides what Zenitsu mentioned, how like all the different ways they could have updated this list, they could have added Rapidmon, they could have added um maybe some purple for like the new Masty stuff. They didn't, and they still won. So they still top 16. They still got an invite to Nats.
I mean, yeah. We're still seeing like even some BT7 decks still do well. Like blue hybrids is still sneaking in, red hybrids, ancient is still sneaking in. Like decks don't necessarily go away. It's just the player and the build that can really help make a deck go far. Because I know everyone was already ready to write off Black War Greymon, and Lychee, probably the best black player that I know. I don't like personally know him, but like I know the name to, he got second place with Black War Greymon. Is that a surprise to me? No, because I think Black War Greymon is a deck where it has a lot of different possibilities because it has both black and red to stem from, and Greymon tribal stuff to support it. Like it's not a surprise that a player as good as Lychee could take the deck and perform very well with. I also think he teched it to beat yellow hybrids based on his build. So that definitely had some good influence on how his deck performed, because if a lot of people were playing yellow hybrids, it just makes sense to play something that beats it.
Yeah, I think that's relevant. Is if you're playing one of the others. So, at this point, we usually kind of narrow down tier one decks, like your what to expect when preparing for events as like your top three: yellow hybrid, blue imperial, and or I guess DNA imperial, and then DNA Masteed probably occupies that third slot. Armor rush, depending on which direction you want to go, it's kind of like your choice at that point. Trying to tech for both would be harder, but you can really just lean into like I want to beat yellow hybrid, and you do. You know, it's possible.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I feel like that's where decks like this and Mastimon shine, or not Mastimon, Lord Nightmon, where it's just like you don't necessarily expect a whole lot out of them, but they could do some really solid work. I think Leechy's list is really interesting, ratio wise, but like it just does kind of make sense. Um, so Chimeramon is just such a stupid card. I hate that card, but I love
Hmm.
it at the same time.
So as far as Mastimon's concerned, because I know we had kind of not necessarily counted it out, but we had been putting it down recently as it was kind of just losing its supposed meta spot to yellow hybrid. Um, but so the fact that it won uh doesn't necessarily surprise me too much. Again, I wouldn't have bet money on it. I would have bet money on either yellow hybrid or blue imperial. Probably blue imperial if I really had to pin it down. Um, but I think again we get more so to the why more so than the what. Human has always played decks that weren't necessarily the most popular deck and done very well and consistently won events. So the fact that they've managed to take this deck that we had already kind of written off, and it's just, you know, taking a deck and really understanding it and playing it to its, ultimate capabilities consistently, uh, is what wins events. And yeah, Mastamon especially is something that I haven't even completely unpacked as a player myself, even though I've played against it a handful of times. And I think it's just a deck that can be played like kind of wrong. And I think that's what contributes to its greater like stat line and but a deck that can be played it's just the Lilith loop of BT08, you know?
It kind of is, because like what Mastimon does on base is, like, for those who don't know what the deck is trying to do, it's trying to DNA into Mastimon to replay a level 5 to go into another level 6. And there's just a lot of good purple and yellow synergy that's going on with the deck. Flame Hell Scythe to basically bring back almost any of your level 5s or even some level 4s to then try to line up another DNA. You have lots of tamer hate, which going into yellow hybrids and blue hybrids and potentially red, you kind of need. So, like, if the opponent isn't just playing Digimon because they're trying to avoid a Flame Hell Scythe, then the Mastimon player could figure out a way to play Lucimon or get up into Zwart Defeat to pop the tamers, because that's what they're going to be defaulting to playing to avoid being hit by removal. So like it still has removal on top of removal, so it's trying to keep the opponent at bay while also doing what yellow is known for doing, which is healing and stalling and chipping, because it doesn't have a super big push game plan. But the Anguimon from the starter deck also can help with that big push. And then they're just running a whole bunch of cards to help facilitate it. Gatomon to easily DNA, set up cheap evolutions into your level 5s. I noticed a lot of the topper one, like the higher end, like players who are performing well, are running a Tech Creepymon because he's just a really good card. Um, then obviously Ophanimon Fall Down Mode is just a good card also. Kill something and recover. So it's just the best two color Digimon next to Mastimon that we have. Um, for the deck to run. Like it's just a very strong deck, but it does require a good pilot to really take it like the next mile.
I think Mastemon, especially like this list more specifically, it's it's not super teched, but I guess like a given the card pool, it is fairly teched. None of these ratios are clean.
No, it looks
At
so
every
dirty on
level,
paper.
at every level,
Yeah.
there's weird ratios going on. One of starter Lady Devi, three of BT3 Lady Devi, two Lucimon, two Angelomon, three Magnet. This is this screams to me. I play tested my deck. That's all because that's exactly what I've been doing since the last event. Every time I play, I'm analyzing, well, what if this card was something else? Okay, let's just trade out one copy and play it again. And do I like it more? Do I like it less? Two copies, like, so you have your options of either pulling out Gatomon for searching, block Gato for rush, Magna for recovery. Like, Flaming Health Scythe is. This is more of a Flaming Hell Scythe deck than a Mastamon deck. I know it still runs the 4 of Masty DNA. It still cares about DNA. But this deck just screams, I will I will play my Flaming Hell Scythe for maximum value every time.
I would 100% agree. I think Flaming Hell Scythe is just that good of a card because for 6, already playing a level 5 is pretty decent, but for 6, killing a Digimon potentially and playing a level 5 and getting more value off of that level 5's on
From
play
your
effect is
trash.
just, yeah, from your trash, which you can set up because there's draw and discard, is just, it is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And if anyone's curious on the ratios are kind of all over the place. You have 8 level 3s, 4 or 6 level 4s, 12 level 5s, 7 level 6s, and 2 level 7s. Then you have 3 tamers and 12 options. So like it is kind of just all over the place where a normal like formula would tell you this does not work, but obviously something about it is working.
Yeah, so that also being said, out of the 50 cards in the deck, there are only three 4 ofs. Gatomon starter deck, new starter deck Gatomon, Mastamon, DNA Masty, and Flaming Hell Scythe. Everything else is less than 4 copies. So I think this, as far as the overall discussion of meta and where Masty falls, I think Masty's just kind of new the Lith Loop, where you need to they're just decision after decision in this deck. Just looking at all the cards and just playing through a turn in my mind. Flaming Health Scythe, what are you minusing? What are you playing back? That's two decisions in a turn, assuming they have more than one Digimon on the field. Or assuming they only have one Digimon on the field, I'm sorry. As soon as you add that, then it adds to the layers of complexity. Call from Darkness, Purple Mem Boost. There's just decisions constantly. This almost looks like it plays more similarly to frickin' Machine Dramon, with how much it wants to cycle and care about its specific level 5s in inheritable, in trash, and the quantity of them for Creepymon, not specifically with 5s, but
Well, Creepymon, like the whole point, Creepymon's a good card for the deck because the whole point is to try
Creepymon's a
to
game
set.
ender.
Well, he's another easy card to bring out level 5s, which is what the deck deeply
Yeah.
cares about.
The deck is
So having
recycle
ways
5.
to Yeah, so having good ways to bring out your level 5s is what the deck wants. So like Ofanimon fall down mode's best target is going to be Gatomon from the starter deck, so that way you could get its on play ability and then digivolve it for 1 into whatever level 5 you need. Creepymon, just if the opponent has enough Digimon and you just mill enough off the top, which is helping fuel your trash that you could then pull from. Um, just allows you to bring out a level 5, something like a Lucimon Chaos mode, to then kill a Digimon or kill a Tamer. Like you have certain cards that are like your bigger cards that are your primary targets for other cards, and then you have like the small minute decisions where it's just like, okay, maybe it might not be optimal, but I do need to bring back this Lady Devi here to do X. So it is a very decision heavy deck, like what Nako said. And I think compared to Imperial Dramon, it is just harder to build and harder to play.
Yeah. I guess because honestly, I just don't have enough experience with or against to really dive in any further than this, other than this list screams I play tested my deck. I play tested the shit out of my deck, and I knew exactly how many copies of each card I want because I want to know how frequently I want to see them and how many I need to consistently be able to cycle through the fives that you want, see the fives that you want, and utilize the fives that you want. Because that's really that's what's right. This deck's running 5 level 12s or 12 level fives. Um, in that you constantly have the choice based on these ratios of which one you want to play and when.
Yeah, and I think that toolboxing potential just makes it a very, very strong deck to handle a lot of different decks in the meta. Like the deck that beat me out of getting into top 64 was a Mastimon deck, and like once it established control, I literally just could not do anything. It was healing, putting itself out of my lethal range when I was going to make powerful swing turns. It was keeping me off my tamers, it was keeping me off my Digimon, like, I just could not do anything once it was fully established, and it felt very demoralizing knowing that I don't have any shot to actually win the game from what it was doing, and I didn't even know how it was getting to that state, but against my match against it, um, it was just for whatever reason consistent, and my deck, which had theoretically better ratios, was less consistent, and I didn't understand it. I honestly did not.
Yeah. I really don't see there's a whole lot more that could be said by either of us, other than anyone that tries to take this list and just copy and paste it, I don't think you will see success. Because this looks like someone who's taken something and made it their own. And unlike, because when I started Yellow Hybrid, I started with the EU Nats list and have since been like modifying it since then. But I think I started maybe 60-80% of the way there. I felt like the list was pretty functional, pretty self-explanatory. Very few of the cards I questioned their ratio or they're placed like as entirely. Whereas this list, you cannot just borrow this list.
No, and that's also the same for something like Imperial, because we all know that Dan Vang was on Imperial and he was the only one of the Imperial players to get into top 8. The big difference between his list and all of the other lists was those small tweaks that he made for his own personalization and customization. So he is a huge proprietor of Nidhoggmon in
Yeah, he was the
Imperial
one that
lists.
popularized it in the old version. I guess the
Yeah,
old
so
old version prior to EX.
and now he's back at that same tech card for the BT8 list. And according to him, and according to the results, it really showed that it did well for him. I also like the fact that he's not running any of the BT8 Vmon. That card is just mediocre at best. I thought it was good as like maybe a tech two of, but like it's just it's always been underperforming. So I have to cut it. Like his list is very very good, especially for somebody who was playing Imperial. Where it's just like, okay, the tech one of Lobomon, I understand, just a good game finisher if you could get to it. Stingmon is obviously the best card in the entire deck because that's what you're going to be using 9 out of 10 times to be able to Jogress. He's not running Chimeramon, but he is running Dino Beamon because there are those matchups, like, especially against Black X Antibody, where they just have one huge stack of a Digimon you just cannot do anything about except suspend, and Dino Beamon suspends it and allows you to get around it. So, like, it's just a very good list that can handle a wide variety of different decks in the meta. Is it doing anything like insanely super spicy outside of Nidhogg? Not really, but sometimes those small little tech choices do matter.
So, um, I definitely think there's less specifically different with this list. So it's interesting you pointed out how tech this list is, and it is pretty teched. It is pretty far from cookie cutter, but from my immediate scan, I was like, okay, he has one Nidhogg and he has one Lobo instead of a Elytramon. But it's not exactly it, but it's this list is still a lot closer. My list is I think 5 cards off of this. I run one
I,
extra starter VMon, less jamming VMon, and he swapped the BT8 VMon for starter VMons. That's it.
Starter V-Mons is so good. That card does make the deck work. So like I'm
Starter 8
already
or starter 10?
uh
Starter 10. Or
starter
9, I'm
starter
sorry.
10
9.
or yeah,
10's
starter
Masty.
starter 9 VMon is so good. Like that's obviously the way better searcher because it has more possible targets. But I really do like the direction that he went, and based on my own personal experience, I'm going to basically combine what I was thinking, what I want to test, and what he was doing, and kind of like culminate that into something slightly new on top of some of what the other lists were doing. So I'm not going to exactly spoil my tech, but I do think the biggest spoiler that I want to give for what I want to try next is actually starting to drop fighter mode. As good as that card seems, I don't think 2 is good. There's been multiple times where I really wish it was the other dragon mode, and that's kind of where I'm going to be slightly shifting my deck is to better support dragon mode from the starter deck because I
Oh,
think that card is absolutely insane.
just go like 3-1.
That's where I initially want to start testing with it. Just because like fighter mode is more acting as the level 7 rather than a sub level 6, especially in Dan's list. Like the sub level 6 is actually Nidhoggmon, and he's just trying to use fighter mode for whatever value he could gain off of it. um but like when I was playing, I just noticed I really want dragon mode more just to split apart and read Jagras. So I'm going to be tweaking my deck to better accommodate that, and I think like just these small levels of changes could make or break results in events.
Yeah. Um, there's still work to be done with Imperial, obviously, especially as Imperial players, I think especially, um, they're in a weird world. Um, they're in a weird world because one, they're blue players that aren't the best deck in the format for the since the last 3, so they seem to have forgotten that yellow is actually the best color. So that's kind of a wake up for them. But I think it's also because they expected to come into this meta being the best deck and being the boogeyman again, coming from Gabumon, coming from Blue Hybrid. And usually every time, at least in the most recent history, Yellow comes to try and fight back, they just kind of squish him, as we saw with Yellow hybrids of BT7 and Mastimon slash Lord Nightmon technically existing in BT6. I know there was a couple people that played some Dynasmon shenanigans, but for the most part, Yellow's basically been absent. Um, outside like because again, Yellow hybrids seeing a lot of play and minimal success outside of a couple token examples, especially due to its like how commonly it was being played. But Blue hybrid or moving to Imperial now, they expected to be the best deck, expected to tech against themselves like they have been, and now they're struggling. I think they're floundering a little bit because, especially when the decks they're playing into that are beating them more consistently are decks that are annoying to play into.
Well, yes and no. So, like, the big crux to Imperial is the fact that he wants to be a hyper aggro deck. And, like, he does out of almost all of the decks outside of, like, Black X Antibody and maybe Black War Greymon, he is, like, the deck that has the highest damage output on a more consistent and regular basis. He does have really fun combo play potential as well on top of that, where you could do some absolutely crazy things. But the big difference between versus yellow and not versus yellow is that recovery factor. The fact that you're going to hit into more security and you have more chances to just hit something very disadvantageous that will just end up screwing you up in their security. On top of the fact that you can't just like count to six and win like you can against other decks. Not saying it's that simple or that easy, because believe me, it's not. But the fact that they do have more potential health, and they usually do, does put you off your game plan because the decks are usually calculated to deal a more precise level of damage.
I think that's an accurate assessment, mostly because what is traditionally defined aggro decks in card games has been, like you said, fine tuning to be exactly as greedy as necessary to get over the finish line. It doesn't matter if they would lose every time if the game lasted one more turn. As long as it doesn't, they win. And Yellow Hybrid does a good job of getting that extra turn, especially when presented with what seems to be sometimes like absolute or outward lethal. They're showing one attack and raising, two attacks on board, zero security. They passed. They didn't win. They stripped the last security. They passed, and then the yellow hybrid player manages to wrangle that board down to a manageable level. Um, but I think their biggest problem, and I guess it really gets into like the meat of what we really wanted to talk about today, was just the uh, yellow hybrid seems to be playing like 4D chess. Not that the players themselves are playing 4D chess, but like the deck is, because what yellow hybrid has done has saw blue imperial as the deck that they need to like tech for the most, found Eden's javelin, pulled it from the depths of like cards nobody cares about anymore, and put it forefront and be like, hey, Paildramon's a really good card. It'd be a shame if I had 8 cards in my hand.
Yeah, because like this goes into like looking ahead and looking at Japanese data. Like Japanese data really wasn't playing with Eden's javelin,
Not at
like
all.
not at all. And then all of a sudden, a dude, I don't want to just it makes it sound less important, but a guy, a very skillful player in Europe, um saw that card and saw the value in it because Europe had the starter decks legal, where the North American one, starting with Carta, did not have starter decks legal. So he looked to see what he could do about the Imperial, and he teched his deck to beat that. And it also helps against other decks as well, probably through lots of playtesting. And his result obviously shows that it did very well. And a lot of people are seeing some similar levels of success with Eden's Javelin. Not everyone is playing Eden's Javelin, but Eden's Javelin definitely is a card that is still on the table. I think a lot of people are still trying to like figure out alternative ways to like stall, recover, and control with yellow hybrids. But I really do think that the core of yellow hybrids is just covery and stall and chip gameplay is really, really annoying, and it does what it does very, very well. So much so that it still sees play even in Japan. But people who are looking to copy Japanese lists are struggling because they're not teching for the American meta, because we do play the game a little bit differently than they do in Japan. And their results and what they consider large or small events is completely different than ours, and how they play best of one versus best of three. That also goes into deck building and deck design. So there's a lot of things like the Japanese can do very well, and the Japanese lists, considering it's more than just Japan. Um, but it goes to show that you can't always rely on the Japanese data and try copying that. It just doesn't work.
So back to where you started, at least. Um, I Well, I don't want to like completely take away the credit of the player that won the EU Nationals. It looks like out of the top 4 or 5 players that played Yellow Hybrid, like most of them were playing Edens. It's where you start to go down, like outside of top 32, outside of top 64, where they're not. So I feel like it's more Breath of the Gods territory, where um I think everyone kind of looked back and saw it and be like, man, Paildramon, 8K body, swinging, jamming. How do you deal with that? And Eden's is just kind of an answer that a lot of people saw. And so first place ran 4, 10th place, the next highest, ran 3, 12th place ran 0, 15th place ran 2. So like at least they were aware of it, right? Like the better players that did very well in this immediate event, um, with everything legal all at once. They saw that, but they all didn't come to the same conclusion because I also see a little further down a couple copies of Seven Heavens, just the minus 10k from security or from hand, but so that decidedly beats Pyldramon, but it has no room for growth, A, and it also doesn't cycle you a card. It's just a net negative for the trade.
Yeah, and even just looking at the top cuts, all of the yellow hybrids who did very well. Third place actually was not running any Edens at all. They were electing to go a little bit more tamer heavy and five heavy instead. So they were trying to basically use Shine Greymon as extra removal. And then their tech option was Tactical Retreat, not so much to hardcast it from your hand. That doesn't sound very great, although you could do it on something like a Pokemon just to get it off the field or something. Um, but it's more for the security effect to just recover because now it puts any aggro deck off their recovery or off their damage plan. But as far as the other ones, fourth place was running Edens, so it was still hardcore traditional. Fifth place was running one Edens, so it saw it as a good tech option for extra removal. And then eighth place was running three Eden. So it is a card that is slowly getting more popularized, and it's showing some really decent results as a result.
Yeah. And some of these lists I think look more like evolutions to BT7 Yellow Hybrid. Um, People are running more copies of just TK and Kari, which the EU list, if I remember correctly, runs completely absent. They don't run, yeah, they don't run
I
any
hate
TK and
TK.
Kari.
I hate TK and Kari. I think that card, like, it's a really good card. I hate what it represents because that card just says, look, I don't want to attack, you don't want to attack, so we're just going to sit here and do nothing. And the second you start thinking about attacking, or I start thinking of attacking, you could start attacking me. Like, it's just a very mechanically unhealthy card on the psychology on what it's trying to do. Um, but I mean, it's still a really good card that has
Mm,
very easy slots and rooms for into the deck with.
yeah, especially so the eighth place list, it looks a lot more like what I would call like yellow stall, more so than like yellow control. It's running the 2 copies of Holy Flame, uh, 3 copies of Yellow Mem, 3 copies of TK and Kari, 3 Edens. So this and also it's running Serafi as its premier mega as opposed to Ofani, just to guarantee that it doesn't pass turn with Digivolving, even with just one tamer out.
Yeah, plus the security tech plus can help deal
Eh.
some extra damage because you do recover a lot. But like the big thing, like the big takeaway is all of these yellow hybrid decks aren't splashing in purple. Like purple is still good splashed into yellow hybrids because of like all of that two color synergy and the cards that are in that two color synergy. But the thing that was lacking in BT7 for um yellow hybrids to succeed was just good yellow cards that it actually wants to use. And Rapidmon kind of was that push to make it more, in quotation marks, mono yellow.
Yeah. I'm I'm still not off of purple entirely. Um,
I'm not either. Like, I still think
I
there's room,
I have a
and
very I have since backed way down on my purple. I'm almost basically back where I started, but I'm still like a step or two away. So my muted package now is I think one Schwartz, three purple Kari, two Chaos Degradation. Which because we don't count Ofani. Ofani still technically exists, but um basically just the only source of purple is purple Kari, but I'm also only running three purple option cards that require purple Kari to be down.
or at least a purple egg.
I don't run
Because aren't
purple
you running
eggs,
like,
not
oh,
anymore.
no purple eggs?
The
Okay.
purple eggs kind of sucked. That was the easiest change. The purple eggs were really bad.
That's fair, because like the best ones just draw
Well,
and discard,
it
and
wasn't
the
so
discarding
much
part's not super great.
it wasn't so much the eggs' fault. The eggs were kind of fine. I though I really disliked draw discard in a yellow base deck, not so much a purple base deck, because those cards were gone outside of Susano. But so as much as it was filtering, it wasn't necessarily um, meaningful filtering in the form of like progressing my hand towards a better hand. I was usually just trading an equivalent card just as not to lose tempo or lose an amount of cards in my hand that I cared about. But more so it was the purple rookies or the yellow rookies that digivolved off of purple eggs that sucked, that were just strictly worse than Salamon and Patamon, so I swapped back.
Yeah, because you have the starter deck Salamon, you have Lotmon, and then you have Candlemon, which all are not very great
They're all
cards for
irrelevant.
yellow hybrid.
The
Yeah,
most one
they're all
being
around.
the
You do
4K
have
body,
Sukaimon. Yeah, you do have Sukaimon, but that's a
also
purple
irrelevant.
that
It
could digivolve.
whiffs
Yeah.
real hard in this deck. You don't want to play that ever. So,
No.
um, that's at least where I'm at right now. Still experimenting. Unfortunately, I'm not able to make any of the remaining uh regionals, so I'm kind of just waiting to see what they announce next. But um,
The But the interesting thing that I noticed as far as like these yellow hybrid lists is they are not afraid of Black X Antibody, which Black X Antibody is a very scary deck, but like none of these decks seem like they're actually afraid of it.
I
Even
think
the imperialists aren't really afraid of it. Like the big weakness to X antibody is it's a tower deck, so you're investing so much into that one stack that once that one stack is gone, the deck literally falls apart flat on its face. um and the deck is trying to be designed to where it can't be broken as easily, so it has the tools to do it, but like for whatever reason it's just not topping.
I think it's because it it has some dyssynergies as I found through playing the deck. The two different Black X antibody lines aren't super congruent with each other as much as I thought they would be, just based on all of the rookies being able. They're all on play rookies, but they both have decently effective inheritables. They can be cycled for just tucking, drawing with Dorimon, activating the effect of whatever level 5 or level 6 you're using. Um, Breath of the Gods is still a fantastic card in a call for the meta. I think I'm running 3 at the moment. 4 may not be wrong. Um,
I would run 4 because blue just bounces it, and then yellow just DP reduces. Like it's a good card to answer literally two of the best decks. So I would personally run it. It's just, yeah, the dyssynergies between the two boss monsters is kind of what is kind of harming the deck. That's why like I'm almost thinking maybe instead of Dorimon just go full OTK and just go Alphamon, because even at worst, Alphamon's security ability isn't irrelevant. And it adds itself back into your hand in case you have a hard time finding a level 6. So, I don't know.
well, so again with Breath of the Gods being a thing, being like a Zubagon punch that doesn't give you security or DP um in usage, in effective usage. But it just relies upon you kind of fall into that Jesmon problem where you can't rely on getting a specific stack too much, or else you lose. And while you can tune your deck around that, you still have to run the other. You're just forced to. So before, you were forced to run all of the X antibody cards and then a bunch of filler. Now we have two X antibody lines, and now you can run all of the X antibody cards and very, very minimal, if any, filler. But the problem is that some of those X antibody cards are still pseudo filler because they're only there because they say X antibody.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same way. I was playtesting the deck a little bit and I was just like, this is great, but it really doesn't matter. It doesn't mean anything.
Especially because all of the Oryu line effects don't stack. As far as you only need one of them because it grants a keyword. So the second Hisaryu is irrelevant. The second, um, I don't remember the other names, not gonna lie. But second copy of blocker, second copy of decoy. First of all, decoy is irrelevant on your main stack, so that's just garbage in its own right. But second copy of blocker, second copy of reboot just isn't helpful. And you just continuously need to tuck them and cycle them for various card effects.
Yes, which puts a heavier emphasis on the Doru line, which if you don't have the Doru line, then you're
And you're still
still kind
constrained
of
to your Doru line as far as your, they gaining memory is always useful. Adding DP is
drawing.
always useful. Security attacks always useful.
Yeah.
And it really does come down to that dyssynergy that um because if you're swinging, even if you like if you have the premier cards in hand, let's say you are swinging with a Hisaryu, you are tucking a Oryu and then digivolving into an alpha. That's the ideal line of play right there. You're missing a sec +1 from a Doru Gray, unless you got it earlier, but I don't think you did because when would you have tucked it? Um, and at the same time, you need to tuck Doru Gray because otherwise, if you're not really punching that hard, you give them time to remove you. You have to save some memory to play Breath of the Gods, or they'll just tuck it or DP minus it.
You're not wrong there.
And all of that
But
being said, like, because I know you mentioned earlier we were going over Imperial, Dino B, arguably one of the worst cards in Imperial Dramon, just goes around it.
yeah. I've seen like part of also the reason is the success of Armor Rush, because Armor Rush chooses to use a menagerie of DNAs because, well, Vmon has the easiest access to any of the DNAs. So you could run Shikuamon, which could bounce it. You could still run Pail. You could still run Chimera to try to shrink it and do various other things. Like there's it's another deck that kind of like toolboxes itself around a lot of other decks.
So so we're seeing the meta play out. We're seeing that even when teched against, yellow hybrid's still the boogeyman deck, probably. At least, especially in we don't have full statistics here to work with. Top 16s don't really tell us the whole story because if we have four yellow hybrids in the top 16, uh, how many like were total played? I guess really kind of matters. How consistent. So going back to the event that I played in, not this last weekend, but the weekend prior, um, I did manage to,
Jakarta.
I did tie my second to last round. And my final round, I played against an opponent who was also yellow hybrid. I finally played the mirror for the first time. I had managed to dodge it all day, but everyone else that I was talking to from my team and otherwise was complaining about how they've only been playing yellow hybrids. Um, and then when I played against the mirror, I asked my opponent, like, "Have you been playing?" He's like, "I've only played yellow hybrids." I was like, "Oh, like, what's your record?" And he had tied round one. and that's why he tied round one in a yellow hybrid mirror and consistently just played other yellow hybrids that tied throughout the rest of the day.
That was what happened to me when I was in Carta. I round one faced yellow hybrid, tied it, and then proceeded to see a whole bunch of yellow hybrids. At least almost half my games were yellow hybrids, just because of that tie. Like getting a tie, especially early on, is actually probably the worst thing you could possibly do. It will screw up your run. It lets you.
Unless you're playing Black War Greymon and you're tech
I
to beat yellow hybrid.
I mean, even red hybrids still is pretty okay into yellow. It's not as good, but it's not awful. Just because you can just punch for a lot and ignore the fact that their security could be a threat. Um,
Yeah,
like
because
that's kind of why red hybrid always seems to manage to squeeze into the top 16, like almost always. Is because it just sees. I hit my mic. Sorry. Um, it does just see or has the possibility to see a lot of yellow hybrids and then it just farms them. I'm not saying it's free, but the fact that you could just be like, okay, here's an ancient Greymon out of nowhere swinging for 3 to 4 checks. Um, there goes half your security. Now you're going to have to struggle bus to rebuild. And then I'm just going to reload the next one and just continue the pressure. On top of like the Crimson Blaze being an absolutely insane removal card. That card is so good.
yeah.
Uh, and then you also have like good red removal, Atomic Blaster. You do have some really good eggs. Gurimon is one of the best eggs that red could have ever hoped for. Just because red was lacking some card draw, which is why in the 11th place list he's running red memory boost, but no Gurimon, which is weird, but I don't disagree. Um, so
So
like it's still a strong deck. And with the Gamamon line and Hero as a good budget card, a lot of people could easily jump on the deck and play it. You don't need the Ancient. The Ancient just helps. Um, but it's definitely a strong, solid deck.
um so yeah, just while there are definitely other options you can use, um these other decks manage to to creep in and take away placings and do well. Um, it really just shows how if you just escape the top a little bit, the base is fairly wide amongst the top like tier 1.5, upper tier 2, and I guess I would even say just actually tier 1.5 as far as like defining them as decks that can beat tier 1 decks. Maybe not super consistently, but enough to put up, some high consistency win strings of wins. Um, but when really you narrow down to that like top three, um, and what that means for the meta and what that means for the meta moving forward. So we had mentioned yellow hybrid kind of had kind of stolen the limelight a little bit by reaching forward and snatching Eden's and putting it at the forefront and like, hey, kind of the way the blue hybrid did a little bit from last format, where Blue Hybrid came out the gate in Japan running this like 4 Koji, 4 Magna Garurumon package and was slower and it was losing to Yellow Hybrid and it just was a worse deck. And then by the end of the format, obviously MDF was present for them. So MDF Susanomon was just the new Lobo for game. Um, they managed to take the tools given to them and really work and refine it. And then so we started from that place in North America. So for yellow, we're starting from the end of what Japan started with, even if their data is less relevant and less useful for us. But we know DNA MP really was going to be a thing, and people they've had months to just look and play test and figure out what makes that deck tick and how to beat it. And so I think yellow hybrid really like DNA's tripped up a little bit, and that's why it isn't winning events to the degree that we thought it was or thought it would, and how yellow hybrid a deck that a lot of people completely wrote off prior to the start of this format is now one of the premier decks, and it's just consistently going to be at this point.
Well, DNA didn't like trip up. It's still insanely strong. Like blue hybrids just it has a very hard time with on top of having a hard time with
I don't
Black
think
War
it's
Greymon, but that's a different
won a
story.
major North American event yet, right?
Imperial?
Yeah.
I know it won one event. I don't remember which other region because there were other regions that also had
Yeah.
regionals or ultimate cups, and it did win one. I don't remember which one, but I know for a fact it did. But like, it's still insanely strong. Like Imperial can just shit damage. Like, pardon
Oh
my
yeah.
French. It has the
No,
ability to
like
just absolutely dump the damage. Like it is straight gas. And I
I've
love the deck for it.
yeah, I mean,
And like to
everyone's
beat
got
yellow
their
hybrids, that's
kicks.
yeah, and to beat yellow hybrids, that's what you have to do. You have to have the ability to consistently just dump the damage, put your foot on the gas pedal and never let go. Yellow hybrids just unfortunately has the best recovery engine in the game and according to Japanese results is the best recovery engine in the game even all the way up to BT10. So it's still going to be incredibly stupid, incredibly annoying. On top of the fact that as long as there's good yellow hybrids, or not yellow hybrids, good yellow tamers, it doesn't matter. It's just it'll always be a thing because of that. Um,
So,
but regardless, like Imperial just having the ability to dump damage is what makes it really, really good. Its slight downtick in Japan is because other decks can just dump damage as well. So like the deck seems to have a big struggle with decks that can out damage its recovery. So that's probably the biggest takeaway into trying to beat yellow hybrids is just have lots of damage. I'm not saying you need to just play red hybrids as a result.
I would
Red
actually
hybrids is
recommend
probably
against it, honestly.
um
Just
red
'cause
hybrid
you're
struggles
better
with
off.
other decks in the meta
Well,
is the problem.
that's the thing. So like, I guess that's a consistent point we return to is that you can recommend deck C all you want. It just if you're losing to deck just to beat deck A, but if you're still losing to deck B, it matters almost more so than whether you beat deck A. So a lot of decks I think could be that third deck. Red hybrid, Mastemon, blue hybrid, um
Black
Lord
or gray.
Nightmon, Black War Greymon, Armor Rush. All of them could arguably beat Yellow Hybrid. Could be teched and played in a way that beat Yellow Hybrid. But as we just mentioned with Blue Hybrid or with Imperial, it shits damage in a way that all of those other decks also don't recover and therefore can't deal with. Imperial can farm some of these other decks while they're struggling to set up with what they want to blow out the game with.
Because like the big thing with Imperial and kind of why I'm leaning more towards Dragon mode is the fact that it also could build a very wide board state very easily out of nowhere. So like literally just the combo play of like having a memory fixing tamer, so Davis in play, having an XV in raising, and a Stingmon in hand literally guarantees you 3 damage if the opponent's security doesn't do anything to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, you could extend it where it's like, okay, if you have Davis and Ken on the field, you could then still be able to find a way to gain memory, digivolve into an Imperial, and then just have another line of Jagras literally set up for free to continue the aggression. Like that's just what makes the deck insanely fun is just lining up like what combo plays with what DNAs you have to just do incredibly dumb things with. And I love the deck for that. And that's kind of like why it could just beat a lot of the other decks in the meta is because it just moves that fast because of how DNA Digivolution works as a
So
which is why Armor Rush is like a good close second because it could do something similar. It just is a little bit more field dependent rather than specific card dependent, which has its own pros and
I
cons.
really would need more data because I feel like every time I say a deck sucks, I'd like immediately get proven wrong shortly thereafter. But I in the very limited experience I have against Armor Rush, I felt like, you know, they were Magikarp to my like Gyarados every time as yellow hybrid. Like I it was sad. I felt bad for the person because they could literally do nothing. And I just, oh, you've, played a Vmon and, you make your wide board, you search, you digivolve into your armors, and then Rapidmon? Okay. Uh, Eden's in security? Okay, that's dead. The one that already swung, that one's fine. The other one's dead, you know?
Yeah, so like our teammate um Lewis.
Yeah, Luis.
Yeah, Lewis has been doing pretty good on Blue Hybrid, or not Blue Hybrid, on Armor Rush, and he really likes it. Just because again, against a lot of things that aren't Yellow Hybrid, it just still does relatively well. Just because Armor Purge makes your Digimon really really sticky. Obviously, Yellow and Rapidmon get around that, but if they don't see Rapidmon, then you could just go very fast and hit very hard very quickly.
Yeah.
Although the interesting thing is the top 16 list is not running Fire Rocket. They're actually just playing basically Imperial using the Armor Rush to have better access at Shaku.
Well,
Uh,
I mean, I felt like it was a notable thing. It isn't called Armor Rush. It's called DNA Armor by like the wording of the player playing it. So,
yeah, so
it's
Yamski
not
built
really
the
Armor
deck
Rush.
and yeah, Yamski built the deck or all of the top 16 decks on DigimonCard.io. Um and yeah, she labeled it DNA armor probably because it is the hybrid of both of those mechanics where
Yeah,
you're
it's
using your
not.
armors to facilitate your
Yeah,
DNAs.
it really is like so armor. Yes, it's still running a large armor package. I think maybe a more accurate. Well, so it's DNA armor. So yeah, just armored Jogress. I guess DNA is Jogress, but
Yeah,
like
DNA is Jogress. DNA Digivolution is a mouth. Jogress is just easier to say.
yeah. So but yeah, the entire idea of this deck cares more about Jogressing than it cares about its armors, though its armors still exist to facilitate um, gainful Jogressing. Because the best case scenario I found when playing Imperial is the rare like edge case opportunity against okay, I raise Vmon with or I raise XV, I swing, I have a Vmon from last turn that I had played for a draw. I Digivolve to an armor. I swing. It doesn't die. It's still a level 4. I can then Pyildramon, swing, dragon mode, split. Like that the whole line of XV swinging, jamming, most likely living against as long as you're not playing Yellow Hybrid. And then Lydramon swinging or I guess, yeah, specifically usually Lydramon in Imperial at least. Lydramon swinging at 5k as an armored Digimon, it's not going to die completely, but if you lose that armor, you can't Jogress.
Well, no, that's why in Imperial, Stingmon is the most important card in the entire deck.
Yeah, you just
I'm
slap that
like
shit, but it can't swing.
people can fight me. You don't care. It just lines up a Jogress. Like you honestly don't care.
It's an extra
Like
swing.
if you're hard playing, I mean, yes, but if you're hard playing a like it Lydramon's in the deck because obviously green, but like it also has various other synergies because like you could armor purge, digivolve into a new one, unsuspend it to attack again. If it lives, then you could DNA. Like there's more aggressive lines of play with Lydramon and Davis and Ken as a tamer. But like uh it just shows that it's a very aggro based deck. Granted this isn't playing um the XV, and instead, basically, the XV replacement is Flamedramon, where you're
Yeah,
just trying to hope that 8K
swing
makes
with
it so that
8k.
you live. Um, and it's a red source, so that well, I mean, the red source
Well,
doesn't really
so
matter.
it's an 8k with
Yeah,
a
it's just an
jamming
8K
V
with
under
armor
it,
purge.
with jamming V
Yeah.
underneath it preferably, so that you can fire rock. But I guess again, this one isn't running fire rocket, so who
The
cares?
big thing, like the big thing between this and a normal traditional Imperial is the fact that you're trying to use armor texture to be extra aggressive. So like triggering a armor texture in security means that you could basically play a searcher VMon out um for free. So that's not irrelevant, or even just any of your VMons. Just getting them out for free is not irrelevant. That's an extra body they might not have been accounting for. Um Armor purge just makes it sticky on top of supporting multiple different colors. And then armor texture just allows you to also be more aggressive by swapping into them, like swapping in and out. So you could be like jamming Vmon, swing, Digivolve, unsuspend with Ken and Davis, swing, armor texture, change, swing again. Like that's three swings for basically just Digivolving once, um, like traditionally. So
That's
there's just
assuming
a
it
lot of,
lives. That's I guess tying back to the real crux of armor rushes. If it
well,
dies the
that's why
first
Ken
time,
and
it doesn't
Davis,
matter.
yeah, that's why Ken and Davis is so important, because if you swing with jamming Vmon, it lives. Digivolve, suspend, swing, it pops. You're still left with that jamming Vmon that you
Hmm.
could still then Digivolve if you have another Davis and Ken swing
Oh yeah,
again, or still trigger like armor texture by Digivolving up and then armor texturing.
I think
Like it's still a,
you're misinterpreting what I mean by dying. I don't mean by purging. I mean like Eden's.
oh,
Like
I
it's
mean,
gone.
you don't care. Like as an aggro deck, you have to just not care. Like
Yeah,
especially against yellow, if they run it, they run it. If they don't, you just have to do it. Like you can't not do it just
I
because,
know.
oh, I can never swing into yellow security because Eden is a card. It's like you
Yeah.
don't care.
I mean,
You just
you
have to
have to
do it.
you have to pray to you have to pray like regardless in that matchup. I'm just saying that it's again from my very limited experience with it's just such an uphill battle. It's not like I usually don't mind winning. Like I at least I I feel some amount of pride when I win as control versus aggro because you have like a very limited window to stabilize, a very limited window to like I played like even the one armor rush player I played into, I was down to one security, I think turn 2, turn 3, like I was they swung, they popped, they reswung, they textured, they reswung, like they had cards, they played cards. And even then, that was game 2. The only reason I wasn't afraid was because game 1 was so one-sided and then, you know, the following turn from that was um Kazemon into Jet Selfimon into Afanimon. So I recovered 2, stabilizing completely with what remained of their board.
I mean, like that is
Yeah.
just the strength of yellow hybrid, just because it has like it's mostly the recovery. You take away the recovery, yellow hybrid is weak as shit.
I mean,
I'm sorry.
you
Yellow
take away
hybrid
the
just
Jogress and
without the,
Imperial's weak as shit. Let's just take away core mechanics.
well, no. So like even just digivolving for 4, swinging twice with a Pyildramon, that's, especially with jamming, that's still something.
If you start your turn with 4.
You will. Trust me, I've played the deck enough to know you can very easily start with 4. Just a Ken and Davis and a Davis on the field,
Yeah.
just immediately set you to 4.
Um,
But like I digress, and like as much fun as Control is, I don't, having rounds just literally taken away because of how slow and grindy and not fun it makes it is my huge problem with yellow hybrids as a whole. Like it does just slow down games on purpose mechanically. Like from a fundamental level, it just says, look, we're not going to have a quick game. This is going to take a while. So strap up and get ready to have zero fun as I proceed to do nothing, wait for you to do something, and then kill it immediately after, potentially. Like,
hmm.
it just tries to instill fear and the illusion of choice. And I think that's just not very, like, from a more aggro standpoint, yes, I am an aggro player. It's just not fun. Like I've had more fun with Magic the Gathering than literally telling me I can't play my cards than yellow hybrids giving me this false.
I think it's just I know we've touched on it a couple times. It really does have to do with that like the lottery that is security. Because again, in Magic the Gathering, control versus aggro, I can fucking count. Like like it's that simple. You have 2 mana floating. You have 2 mana you can spend to do something. I don't know what you're gonna do. You could basically just like wait till the end of my turn and then play a card that searches for a card. That mana could have nothing to do with what you're going to do to me this turn. I'm showing X, and it's also like just the difference in having a health pool versus having a security. Jamming Vmon and Ophanimon check the same amount of security. So one's significantly easier to get out. Um, the
Yeah,
idea
but
that
that's why removal is super prevalent in Digimon,
yeah,
and it's almost super prevalent to a detriment where it's just like I go into every single one of my turns expecting whatever Digimon is on the field to no longer be on the field. Like to me, as a player who wants to play their cards and do stuff with them, that feels really bad, which is what facilitates like stack-based decks. Or like once you get into a position or you know the opponent's deck doesn't have an out to your card, like as blue hybrid, if they have a level 5 or 6 on their field, there's no way I'm touching it other than stun locking it. And
hmm
even then, if they just are able to get out of the stun, blue hybrids
that's
is screwed.
well,
Like, and that's
that's
what DNA does.
that's
And
pseudo
that's what
removal
Blackboard
though.
Greymon does.
Like so, while
It
technically
it
the
is
card
pseudo
remains
removal.
there, if anything, it's almost worse than removal because if you just kill my level 4, if Kudamon or Kumamon or Tommy instead of just said delete a level 4 lower, it's almost a worse card for their engine because yes, well I can still digivolve off of my card, I can still potentially gain value off of my card. You're gaining value off of my card. So, in regards to I guess like something we're wholly in agreement with is I don't expect my crap to live. So, even as yellow hybrid approaching the table against Imperial, you know, well, there's always the chance that you're just going to go around me, which is usually the case in that matchup specifically. But Megadeth
Yeah,
still is a Megadeth
Ophanimon
is a
fall down
card.
mode is so hard. Yeah, it's so hard for Imperial to outside of Megadeth. Like it's because like you have to be able to kill it and the body that comes out from it, which is what makes
Eh,
Ophanimon fall down mode so
do you
good.
though?
No, I've yes, you do. I've lost games because I could not deal with the Ophanimon and the residual body because they just use that residual body to go back up into something else that's stupid. And
Well,
I'm just like, well, that sucks for me.
that's I think you have to play a game of numbers at that point, and obviously
Well,
it's
that's why, like, you're forced to ignore it almost and just try to beat them in the face as quickly as you possibly can, which also isn't necessarily the best answer. Which
well,
is why Ophanimon Fall Down Mode in Mastimon is also really good because it just helps you go back up.
you play the game of numbers in two ways. One, and this is coming from a yellow hybrid player, hoping to let you beat yellow hybrid, at least to show you behind the curtain that it's not as bad as it may seem. Because step one, we run 2 to 3 level 6s. Getting rid of Ophanimon does still matter, even if you replace it with a level 4. Step two, we run 4 level 5s. So even if, so like, if for whatever reason I have my second level 6, the only other copy of Ophanimon in my hand, and one of the 4 copies of Jet Sylphie in my hand, and you kill Ophani, and I immediately just go back to Ophani, that's happening once. Like I guess that's only happening once. If I have
Yeah, but
both.
we're at a point, yes, but we're at a point where once is enough. Like that's why a lot of these stack-based decks are focused so much on that one stack. Um and like they're assuming they're only going to be able to do that once, which is why a lot of decks run 4 eggs is because okay, this game probably isn't going to go long enough where I'm just going to constantly keep my Digimon out of raising and have it just die. Like you have to be able to get the most value out of your cards, and that's why like these tower decks just hide in raising, move out at basically level 6 or level 5 depending on what the deck is, and try to get as much value that way.
Well, so I think the egg thing more comes to just turn length. So it takes 2 turns to use an egg. Hatch, raise, hatch, raise. So each time you're using an egg, so you have that's 8 turns if you hatch and raise every turn, which you traditionally aren't. Again, because you're trying to conserve resources, but like that's still a lot. That's a long game, especially for in Imperial versus Imperial. If you're hatching and raising every turn, and you're using all four of your eggs, like that's a long game.
I mean,
Because
ideally, yes. But like that's what I'm getting to. It's just like the games wants to end shorter, and Yellow Hybrids is artificially prolonging it because it's just trying to stall the opponent out. Like, it doesn't necessarily matter that you only have two level sixes. If that level six can swing for two security, you're already very like feeling very good about your position because you know they won't be able to recover when you could. So like that's why the chip game is super important in yellow hybrids is because that's how they deal damage. Like they're not always going to try to have you sit at 5 security and then Susano hit for 3 all at once. Like no.
hmm
They're just going to try to chip and willow you down, and any card that can gain additional resources on top of already doing its initial thing is insanely valuable.
I think I will say like it anyone that's played against Yohara enough would this is very easy to figure out though, but the one thing that I do think that accelerates Yellow Hybrid's game plan is you really have to be very cognizant of how much memory you give them because they basically play the whole game not necessarily stalling and waiting, just accruing it's a slow resource gain, a slow build of okay, am I finally going to be able to Susano and swing in the same turn? That's really like their goal, either through a leftover Ofani in some cases, but most often through the actual Tuck Tamers, Tuck Hybrids swing because that's what those Jet Sylphie stacks really are to me. Obviously, the recovery for one is stupid and hilarious, but that's if you then kill Jet Sylphie, that's three in the trash, 3 out of 10. I only get four of those, but I don't need four.
And that's like to the benefit of yellow hybrids on why it could run the ratios that it's running. It's just like even if the game is prolonged and you basically could cycle back through your deck, it's like that still off Ophanimon that you didn't use a Jet Sylphie with could still be useful. Like even just if you have like a purple package and are able to draw and discard it, it's like it's still valuable.
Hmm.
Um and it's just an incredibly dumb deck.
I think,
I freaking
well,
hate it.
that's fine. Um, Imperial still definitely has options. I still think there's. I don't think someone's gonna pull a card out of their ass that no one else has thought of before, and it suddenly flip the matchup to being like a strong contender for Imperial. I think they're gonna struggle with it regardless, but I think for the first time, again since BT5, we have a deck where the the match to practice isn't necessarily a mirror. I think the Imperial versus Yellow Hybrid match is the highest expression of skill in the format at the moment. From either end, either player could win that
I just
with
think anything versus yellow hybrid takes like a
well,
lot of skill because there's a lot of management, risk mitigation on top of just damage calculations and combo potential. Like yellow hybrids is a very polarizing deck, and that's why it is the number one deck to beat this format because of how polarizing it is and
mm,
how easy and consistent it is to use. To play, maybe not. I find it a little bit on the easy side compared to some of the other decks, just because you literally tame or pass most of the game, hide a rookie in raising, and then pull that out in Magna. Like it's not super complicated to play it. Playing against it is kind of complicated, and that's part of the reason why the game pace is slowed down is because you have so much more on the opposite end to to analyze, and you do could and it could easily lead to analysis paralysis where you just can't think of the proper decision because again RNG security lotto could easily ruin things or it, on either side of the table.
yeah. Um, so I don't. I mean, I definitely don't agree with that, but um, more so, I think there's a difference here in that Imperial Imperial is almost somewhat misrepresented. I think Yellow Hybrid and Imperial are coming at their deck building from different directions. I mean, mechanically and otherwise. But um, what I mostly mean is the idea that Imperial is a starter deck that is just splashed with a couple extra cards that allow it to do what it needs to do. Um, and but it really it comes from an ease of accessibility. Yellow Hybrids is potentially the least accessible deck I can think of. Yellow control decks have always been some of the least accessible decks I could think of. And so your
I
default,
think yellow hybrids makes it a lot easier though.
yeah, it's
Just
it's it's
because
not
like
as bad as
it's all
security
in
control was.
BT7. Like it's 90% in BT7 to get the hybrid core, and then you just throw in whatever tamers you feel like. It's Cody's a rare. TK's probably the least accessible card in the entire deck outside of Susanomon. Um, and you could just run Kari instead. And Kari with the deck, instead of like searching, just makes you even more efficient on your recovery because it's like you recover, gain a memory. Cool. Now my Jet Sylphie is 0.
Yeah, but
I'm
well,
like, it's
it puts you in a position to make your memory tamer tapped though, in positions where you want to use your extra memory tamers for things that aren't wanting them tapped. But so I just go back to I think um like the way it plays the game, the deck building itself, um while Blue Hybrid was obviously very successful and very like congruent in its build process. Um so I mean starter Patamon, BT2 Stalamon, Rapidmon's a super rare. It's one of the more. It's now I think as of I remember us discussing it over the weekend. It was the most expensive super in the set, passing Chimeramon finally, up towards the $20 threshold at just the for the regular art. Um, yeah, there's still like a large portion of it is just a handful of cards from BT7. Susano is a secret rare. What I mostly mean is not necessarily specifically the cards. I think it's just that um those that are playing yellow hybrid, like I think want to play a yellow control deck. Either maybe they're um like people in rehabilitation from playing security control, um, or they're people that played Lord Nightmon and want to reignite that old flame of being the best yellow deck, or they're just people that played yellow hybrid in BT7 and they're finally happy for the first time in 3 months. But um,
they're not allowed to be happy. I'm sorry.
well,
Not with that deck.
and
Because we know it's gonna survive for at
well,
least the next couple of sets, and it's only gonna get worse and feel even more bad. So like that's why damage is going through the roof is because they make stuff like yellow hybrids where it's like you have to, otherwise that deck is gonna stay the best deck forever. And what are they gonna do? Try to ban cards from it when they clearly don't want to.
we don't
Otherwise,
know that yet.
Jet Sylphie already would have hit that list.
I mean,
We
it.
don't know how frequent they want to ban cards. Right now, it's annually. I
Well,
don't think that's nearly enough,
I
but
think
eh.
I think the we're on the other end. Well, I guess I'll finish my first line of thought first because like just the idea that those building. So I just think you're wrong in your assessment of the challenges when facing yellow hybrid and why it's such a hard deck to play into. Because I think equivalently, Imperial is just as bad, but you don't realize it. It's like a
Well,
psychological thing because you only have
in
half as much time to make those mistakes and or decisions because the game is over.
well, the big difference between Imperial and Yellow Hybrid is like Imperial is an aggro based deck where it's trying to rely on a lot of burst damage out of nowhere. And that's something you can't necessarily accommodate for outside of just hoping your security is literally just good enough.
Yeah.
Where Yellow Hybrids, it's trying to go for a slow, drawn out game with even more decisions that need to be made on a micro and macro level. Where Imperial, it's because there's less time and less decisions. Yes, those decisions mean more, but because there's still less of them, it's easier to spot where things went wrong.
Hmm.
So I can't necessarily spot as easily where things went wrong against a yellow hybrid deck to actually learn and grow. I just know, oh, I hit their security. Their security was good enough to win them the game. Oops, I guess I shouldn't hit security, except I have to hit security.
Well,
So it like catches you in this catch 22 of just feels bad moments no matter what. That's harder to play against and harder to learn from.
well, I think exactly what you just described is the difference between a good and a bad player. Bad player, oh, swing security wrong? Question mark. Well, no, good player is there was things you could do. There's always, I mean not always, but like there are things that could have been done. There are lines of play that led to you not relying on like I mean even in the mirror like cuz it just gets to that point usually. I Susano and I swing for 3 checks. I hit Wyvern's Breath on the first check, I die. Like there are ways to play around that. Um
Yeah, but sometimes you just don't have those plays and you can't play around it is like
but
literally what I'm trying to get at.
yeah, but
And it's a lot more dangerous swinging into a yellow hybrid security than it is swinging into an imperial security. Imperial security, the only thing I'm actually afraid of is maybe a hammer spark, which they started cutting down on, and a mega death. Outside of that, I'm not afraid of anything into imperial security.
well,
Yellow hybrid security, just hitting tamers is already bad enough because I know it fuels and accelerates their game plan if I'm unable to kill them. So like you literally against yellow hybrid, this is why decks that can just shit damage do well against it. You just have to formulate that big push turn and hope things go right.
I think the really like the tagline I would use is don't put yourself in a position where you can lose to security. Now, again, there are sometimes there's no way out. Sometimes you lose before you know you lose. Technically, like, you could just pick up your 5 cards and just lose the game, you know? Like we're in a world without mulligans and side decks again, and you can't take that game and but I think it's still a psychological issue because as much as people can harp on yellow and its security and its recovery, it's the fact that you can lose to a blue hybrid or a blue imperial 3 rounds in a row, but it only took 10 minutes to lose. So it didn't feel that bad psychologically when if you it took you an hour to lose to yellow hybrid and now you're pissed because it wasted your time and you lost.
Yes, that's definitely part of it. I'm not gonna lie.
So
Like just
because it's a
even
loss is a
tying the yellow
loss.
hybrid.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
ties. The ties also, that's the twist of the knife is man, I spent all this time and I am a proponent of maybe reassessing the tying rules, reassessing what happens when you go to time because as someone who was well, I mean, I guess it might help them a little bit cuz um if you adopt the top cut rules as of now, you then instead of tying just determine a winner by security first, and that would probably just means yellow hybrid wins because no,
Oh,
not
that would
exclusively,
100%.
not
It,
exclusively,
it would mean Yellow Hybrids has a very high chance
but
actually
be,
just winning just by
yeah,
literally doing nothing.
that
I
that would
do not like
encourage
that.
that would encourage a more stall based recovery based deck to exist. Um, but what it would allow for is you know, the resignation victories in the form of um, and everyone's guilty of it. I really try to avoid it whenever possible, especially at the local level. But okay, we're gonna go to time. We are in game 3. I'm playing yellow hybrid. That's just a thing. Um, I'm just not gonna lose. I'm not gonna try and win. I'm just gonna try and not lose. Everyone's guilty of it. I actually, when I was playing Lord Nightmon in BT5, I was playing into a green deck that all they did was make it so that I couldn't swing. They didn't even try and swing because they knew if they just tied, they were better off than trying to win. But it would allow for the few victories that um, let's say it's the final turn. We're at time. We're at turns, and you get me to 1 security, and you can't find that last bit of damage, and you end your turn tying the match. That well, sometimes you're at 3 security there, 4 security. I haven't Susano'd, and you win that match now, as opposed to tying. But more often than not, you're right. Like the yellow security is going to be sitting pretty at 4 or 5, and you're going to just be at 3 and can't recover and lose.
No, that happens very, very often. That's why I like the early game
So,
hybrids, and I just hate it. It is the worst feeling on the other end. Like from I don't play these control decks. I don't get some existential high from just sitting there doing nothing, waiting for my opponent to screw, hoping my security is good enough. Like that's just not the type of player that I am. I'm not saying anyone's wrong for that, but it is not necessarily the most healthiest of behaviors because it does slow down the game quite a lot. Not everyone can make super fast decisions, let alone like complicated decisions to try to risk manage their way through the opponent's security. And that's kind of like why yellow hybrids goes to time, whether it's facing the mirror or not, is not necessarily because the yellow hybrid player itself is playing slow, but because from the other side, there's just too much to think about to try to risk manage, and that's why like I adopted this recent philosophy to not care. And as much as I hate it because it's costed me some games, like if there's no way out, there's no way out, and you don't know that until you start swinging, and that's just what you have to do.
yeah.
And I hate it. I hate the feeling of just like trying it basically for me as an aggro player is like I give up hope on even thinking about trying to win this game. So I'm just going to start donkey swinging and hope it works for the best.
Hmm.
And as an aggro player, it already feels hopeless.
I think as long as you, I think you have to commit to that though, and I think maybe that's something that people will find as the meta settles more, because people want Imperial to be Donkey Deck, and I don't think Imperial is Donkey Deck. I think Imperial is
No,
measured,
Imperial is
measured
100%
aggro,
donkey.
measured
No,
aggro.
it's 100% donkey. Like if obviously you want to get your big combos off and you could line them up, but for the most part you're just donkeying.
Well, I
Like
think
I'm
like,
swinging 110% of the time with XV into Imperial or into Payil to double swing, and if I have the combo Imperial
well,
to form more attacks, like you're just
well,
full
so
gas.
I'm I'm saying measured aggro because you're still aggro. You're still trying to aggress. You're still trying to push your opponent down. You're still providing that pressure. I think the difference is um, you start your turn at 4 memory, as you always do, as you said, Davis and then a Davis and Ken. You raise. You swing XV. Lydramon, or you have a VMon on the field.
You trust me, Lydramon never comes up.
Lydramon's never on the field. Okay.
He almost you always do out of raising plays because you can't
So,
expect a Digimon on the field to live, which is why I say Stingmon is the most important card in that deck because that's where your damage out of nowhere comes from. It's just like,
so,
okay, you raise out, swing once, hard play DNA. You can never expect a Vmon, like a stray Vmon,
mhm.
to just live on the field. It's always going to die
So
90% of the time.
I'm trying to make
If
it
it
as
lives, that's
specific as
great.
possible, but I'll clarify it to its singular decision that I'm trying to emphasize here. You swing XV, you DNA, you swing with Pyeel. It doesn't die. If you could digivolve into dragon mode right then and there and not pass turn, would you waste a swing and risk it dying and screwing the rest of your turn?
No, I would 100% still swing.
That's donkey. So, but I'm saying
Yes. No,
you
because you have
sometimes lose
to.
that game. I'm not saying I'm
Well,
saying you
no.
don't
So
have to.
like
You could
the deck
sometimes lose
wants
that for that.
no, the deck wants you to donkey swing because of Davis and Ken.
Yes, but
So Davis and Ken incentivizes donkey swings because if I digivolve,
I think
then I can
Davis again
unsuspend and that's more
lulls
swings.
you into a false sense of donkey.
No, it doesn't. Like you have some good combo plays with it with hidden potential, but you still have to make those swings because 9 out of 10 times that's going to be jamming if you're doing it correctly. Even if you're not doing it correctly, like you still have to make those swings
I'm I'm just
because
saying
otherwise you're just losing value off of your and that's the thing as an
taking
aggro player you can't do because then your Digimon is gone the next turn.
if it's a level 5, that's a
No,
lot
if it's
harder to
any
remove a
level,
level 6.
no, it's still easy to remove if it's a level 6. There's so many removal for high level bodies, it's insane.
Well,
Even
you
at level 6, I'm still expecting my Digimon to be gone, which is why I'm valuing dragon mode over fighter mode is because I could at least try to form extra bodies to make it harder for them to delete them all. Because there's still not a whole lot of like big mass board there. We have some, but not a whole lot. So I'm just hoping to get extra value out of fighter mode, or not fighter mode, dragon mode from it. But
I
you're still
think
donkey swinging. You were 100% donkey swinging 100% of the
so. But now again, so level 5 versus level 6 removal. Just I could just take like my list slash the lists that have seen success as examples. You're you're running the risk of um do you want to see like you have to see Wyvern's Breath to lose the 6 or you have to see Wyverns or Edens to lose the 5 or
Well,
Schwartz
I
if
mean,
they run it.
you can't like swinging into security. You can't just think I can't swing into security because what
No.
if I hit X?
No.
Like you can't.
But you can say I've taken measured like
No, you
um
still can't. Even like trust me, you still can't. Like that's what makes yellow so miserable to always play against is because no matter what, you still just can't. Like the only thing you could do is taper your attacks and then wait for them to heal it back up. Like you literally cannot. Otherwise, you're just purposely slowing yourself down for potentially nothing. And you're going to only lose value off of your cards because they'll have a removal in their hand because they could fish it out of their security. Or they already did, or they're going to draw it because yellow still has some of the best card draw in the game on top of other tools. Like you always go in no expecting your Digimon to be dead, whether you're swinging or not, so you might as well just swing. I can't
I
tell you
think
how many times I regret not swinging with specific Digimon that's stuck on the field for literally more than one turn. And I always regretted it.
I think that's just the starting point. I think that given enough experience and given enough time, you always start from an extreme. So I think the yellow hybrid starts from the other end and the blue and some they start to creep towards the middle. Because I think I started from the place of I don't fucking swing. I don't give a shit. I'll let you beat yourself. And that was wrong. And I think I now need to be more aggressive sometimes and not care as much about certain Digimon and not value things as much. But I also think if you swing blindly every single time when presented to, yes, you're going to win a decent amount. You're still an aggro deck. But I think you're going to lose matches that you don't know you lose until you lose them. And
Well, if
that's
I was
each.
already going to lose out of the
No, no, no.
security, then it didn't matter to
That's
begin
not.
with.
That's not true though. That's what I'm saying. Is there are ways to play around it?
No, in Imperial there is not. You hard play a Vmon, that Vmon is dead. Like hard play Vmon passed, Vmon is gone. You now effectively have lost value because that Vmon was not able to swing. What way is there to play around it if they're
I.
not letting you?
I.
Is where I'm getting it at.
Well, they're
Like
not stopping you from
yes,
swinging, step one, but
well
they're.
they will 100% kill that Vmon because they know if that Vmon sticks around, it could go into something even more dangerous.
Yep.
And that's something they would rather not
Mhm.
deal with to begin with. So that's why like control
It's
is usually like extra control, out of control almost. Um with how much removal it just has and wants to run.
it. It's a measured trade of resources, and we can't. It like there will no there's no end. There's no way to solve this back and forth. The only way I could prove it to you is with like cards and examples and playing and so that's just I just don't think there's any end to this verbally because we can always come up with token examples to counter the other point. I just think the idea being that um, someone that's played the deck enough and like I think a better well because you tell me if someone's the best at playing a deck in the world, are they literally exclusively going to swing always when available? I just think that logic is flawed. If I
It,
if I what the hell? I just played Reinforced Memory Boost passing turn. You have a Paildramon. You watch me place the Eden's Javelin in security. Do you swing with Paildramon?
if you have enough cards in your hand, yes. If you don't, or if you have enough cards in your hand, then no.
So you're
Because
wrong. So you
because you
that's the
no,
difference
because
then.
your Digimon's already dead. Like so actually you do swing because your Digimon's already dead. Like that's the big difference. Like if you know your Digimon's already dead, it already is dead. It doesn't mean anything. So you do swing with it. And if you don't swing with it, what are you going to do with it then? Like wait to swing with a rookie and then have your mega die? Like that's still the wrong answer. Like, so just knowing that type of information, swinging is still always correct.
Well, I say you don't know till you don't know, because you just have to play like you have to like count cards basically, especially against a control deck. You have to count cards in your head. How many Jet Sylphie have I seen? How many Tamers have I seen? How many? Okay, how many uh Wyverns slash Edens do I think he's running? Have I seen any? Are there any in trash? Have I flipped any in secure? Like you run because there is a finite pool of resources there. Like I guess it's best expressed when you hit the extreme examples of, oh man, I like the easiest case scenario that I've found, especially mostly against, not necessarily because I've played Yellow Hybrid far more than I played against Yellow Hybrid, is if you happen to hit two Susano in security, you ignore its existence from that point forward. If they're running three, you know, wow, this person has 4D vision. They can clearly see into the future, and they're running an incorrect ratio due to this one specific instance of the game being played. Because if you flip two, like at one point, I literally had two Susano in security, zero way to pull them out without, just costing me a card. But like you flip two Susano in security, you no longer care about how much memory you give them because they really just kind of need Susano to capitalize on that to its fullest. Yes, they can slam a bunch of Tamers, or you can let them play Edens for 6 and not pass turn. But those are minor, like, inconveniences as opposed to Susano. Susano is their win con, and if it's gone, their win con is gone.
Well, no, they just double down on the chip. Like that's their
If
backup
they
win con is
can,
just double down on the
they
stall,
usually don't have
recover,
the
and chip.
opportunity.
I mean, if you're playing yellow hybrids, like if you know that your primary line of play is off the table, then you should be good enough to shift your game plan to chip because there's no real blockers to stop you. So like you just try to capitalize on rapid bond value and Ofani value and then just hold back some yellow hybrids. Just be like, okay, I have 7 memory, hybrid game. Like
Eh,
that's probably what you end up doing because you want to get some early chip anyway to line up a Susano.
well, you're
So going to like counting to 3 or technically 4 damage shouldn't be very hard if you're like smart about your resources, knowing your Susanos are off the table.
Hammer Spark exists, so I'm never
You
confident enough
you
in a
you don't
play.
care for
You
Spark.
care because it ends your turn and then you lose. But
I mean,
because
if you're
yellow
starting at
hybrid,
7 memory with no Susano, you don't care about
you're right. If you're
a
starting
Hammer
at
Spark.
7 memory, but um,
Yeah, this we were talking Susano's off the table. What do? You're at 7. No,
Sursana's off the
you
table,
go
and I have
full
three
swing.
hybrid or three tamers and three level fours in hand. Because that's a pretty like not a terrible situation to be in. But um, the idea of um, just the yellow hybrids, while annoying and while controlling, still does exist on the fine line of if I'm not actively disrupting your plays and actively like obviously so the beginning of the game is building is your I'm establishing tamers, I'm establishing board, and then maybe I do a little bit of removal early if you give me an efficient opportunity to, or maybe not, because like that's part of the plays and part of the back and forth is you give me like a pseudo like a half efficient play. I don't like I think if you have 6 memory and you just like slam a couple Vmon, that's wrong. Everyone knows that's wrong. Like but the idea of okay, he has a suspended XV, he didn't have the Stingmon, and he instead played a Vmon. That's a pretty good turn. But okay, maybe he just has a suspended XV, and then he played a Tamer instead, because he still, again, was looking for the Stingmon. And now, do I really want to, like, I can kill level 4, it's pretty good. XV's, only 4 of in the deck. Like, getting Rapidmon out, starting to chip, but like maybe I don't have another rookie. Maybe I only have one Rapid in hand. Like it's a measured. If I use it now, will I have it later? You don't always know that, and that's why it is harder to play from a pilot's perspective, especially because your immediate reaction is basically like kind of what you said is like it's the like the control version of Donkey is just kill everything immediately, always, and then you run out of
Usually
shit
that
to do.
actually is correct.
You run out of shit to
It,
do.
you play tamers. So like that's why Rapidmon is incredibly dumb because like I've seen people like throw Rapidmon out really early, killing maybe one if they're lucky, two things, and that still is the correct play because it got the thing off the field to halt progression while still having a thing on their field that they're now chipping with. And if it lives, it lives. I don't have anything to respond with, even if it gets purged. And then if it does get purged, cool. Now you could try to line up another Rapidmon with the Digimon already on the field. Or if it's like a Salamon, BT2 Salamon, you don't care if it dies because then it's just going to recover. Like that's kind of the whole point. It's like it wants to go for those early game control to chip, and then while you're chipping, you try to establish a field to get you into a better position for the mid to late stages of the game.
I don't know. I think honestly, something I'm genuinely interested now in is us just playing flipping the script. I want to see because I think if you play Yellow Hybrid, you'll understand its cracks maybe a little bit more, and I think especially if you play into Imperial, maybe I'll see that Yellow Hybrid is just as gross as you say it is. But I think we literally just like flip decks and play, and I think that'd be fairly insightful for both of us
Maybe. I'm
because
not like
I've
against it. I just have to wait to get my cards to be able to build it because right now to be able to build it. And
um
Imperial was literally the only deck I was able to build outside of X Antibody, but with X Antibody kind of not doing super hot, I really don't want to try to push that.
yeah um what was I gonna say? I was
But the big takeaway is the meta is still developing. EX2 is just around the corner, and that's going to
supposedly.
introduce a lot of.
I'll hold my breath.
So far, it has zero delays. As
Suppose
of right
yeah.
now, it
How
has zero
far
delays.
how far out was the BT8 delay announced? Do we know? Do you remember?
Uh, they like to announce their delays really late, but as of right, like usually we can go to a distributor website and double check. So if I just go to GTS right now, and look up Digimon, I should be able to see if there's a current delay or
Oh,
not.
I remember what I was gonna
Um,
say. This is just something I'm borrowing from like my league days. The idea
yeah,
that
so far no delay.
um if I've never like usually like to solve especially like my own annoyances with like oh man Fiora's busted oh how the hell am I supposed to beat Fiora? I just play Fiora for a couple games and realize how fucking dog shit it is if you don't know what you're doing. Like
Well,
so
I mean, if you don't know what you're doing, then yeah, you just don't have the experience
well
to do well. But if you do know what you're doing, then you're in some deep shit.
well supposedly Yellow Hybrid's very easy to play, so we'll see if that holds true.
It is very easy to play.
um that's just what I mean. But so no delays yet, that's good. Hopefully there aren't any. Um EX2
There
I
is
don't
no pre-releases for EX sets,
yeah,
by
there
the way, in case anyone's wondering. It is literally
you just
released.
show up and buy
What they
cards.
do, yeah, what they do with EX sets is they have supplementary products. So, like in EX1, there was a gift box. EX2, it's not. I don't think it's labeled a gift box, but there's something a little pack in with some tchotchkes. And EX3 is going to be another gift box. But
So,
anyway,
yeah,
Yellow Hybrids is toxic. Digital Hazard is just around the corner, so the meta is going to change, hopefully for the better. I think there's a lot of fun stuff in Digital Hazard. Um, so I'm excited for that.
yeah. I guess my concluding statements would just be that definitely uh play test your decks a lot. Definitely figure out what you like and what you don't like. Tweak ratios. Uh, don't don't necessarily be satisfied with what you see win online because even even with a lot of these top lists, while they're incredibly similar, they're never all identical, and they never hopefully will be, so that there's not necessarily one correct way to build anything. It more so depends upon how you like to see your deck be played and how you choose to pilot it. Also, if you think Yellow Hybrid's bad, wait till I get to play D Reaper.
Uh, I'm not excited for D Reaper in any way, shape, or form. Again,
I'm just
I
gonna
hate
add a
control
Yellow
decks.
Recovery package to it.
I hate controlled decks with the burning passion of 1,000 suns. Right now, Yellow Hybrids and Mastimon are on my list of decks that I do not enjoy playing against. Just because they're very hard and very annoying. But yeah, that's gonna do it for me.
Yep, I believe we can close it out. Uh, have fun and good night.